Hello and welcome to part 2 of my StarTrails tutorial. In this part we're going to be using 3 programs and talk about how we develop and stack images together. The 3 programs we're going to be using is first Adobe Lightroom, second StarStaX, that's StarStaX, and finally Photoshop. So let's start right now in Lightroom. I've imported my files. I assume everyone knows how to do that. And we're going to take the first image in the series. And again, remember we talked about in the first video how we didn't shoot one long star trail shot. However, we shot continuous 30-second shots. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our first image and we're going to do the basic development that we want to do to it. And that includes adjusting the white balance, exposure. We want to maybe make that a little brighter. Add a little contrast. The highlights and the snow are a little bit much, so let's pull that back a little bit. Boost up those shadows a tiny bit. And whatever other basic things, maybe add a little bit of clarity to it, just to, sharpen the rock up a little bit, a little vibrance, a little saturation that might be a little bit too much. Anyway. The point is just develop the shot the way you want to develop your shot and the way you want it to look. This image here, just so you know, was taken under moonlight, so all the images will look very similar. However, if you did light paint your first and last shot, you actually want to do the developing to the shot that you light painted on. And then we're just going to skip down a little bit. You can make whatever other adjustments you need to. And what we're going to do is we're going to add some sharpening, but we're only going to add sharpening to the stars. The way we're going to do that is we're going to use this masking slider. On a Mac, you hit Alt, Option, or I assume on the PC it would just be Alt. And then what it allows you to do, watch the screen, when you pull it up, it allows you to only select the stars. So you want to get it pretty good there. Some other stuff might be selected. Anyway, you release it, and then you can add sharpening. I like to, for star trails, actually really significantly over-sharpen my image. Next, another trick that you want to use, in order so that you don't have too many star trails in the sky, and your sky doesn't become too busy, you want to actually add a bit of noise reduction to it. And that noise reduction is going to pull out a lot of the smaller and fainter stars. You don't want to add too much because then you start to lose all detail in the rocks. And that looks good right now. We don't have too many stars in the sky. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take our development settings that we did here and we're going to apply them to every other shot that we took. So what you can do is you can go over here to copy. It's right on your lower left-hand side. Click copy, and you're just going to make sure you have everything selected that you need. And then click copy. And then you're going to select your entire range of shots. There we go. Just make sure that they're selected. You hold down Shift and click the first one and last one. Then what you're going to do is you're going to right-click and go to Development Settings, which is around halfway up on the menu. And then you're going to click Paste Settings. By clicking Paste Settings, basically what it's doing is it's applying those settings across the board to every single shot that you took. Now, once that's done, you're going to go back and you're going to export it. And the way we want to export it is we need to, first piece of advice is I find it's really, really helpful to put it in a subfolder somewhere, just so it doesn't get mixed in with your camera raw files, wherever you are saved your original files to. One thing you have to know is because StarStaX only accepts JPEGs in sRGB, you need to make sure your file settings are set for JPEGs, quality 100%, color space sRGB. Make sure you're not resizing or anything, and then just click export. So now that we've exported all of our shots, the next step is to import them into StarStaX, which is a free program. You can download it online. It's StarStaX, just Google it. And I now have it open in front of me. So what we can do is we can go to our Finder and find our images. Just select the ones you want to import into StarStaX. And you basically are going to drag them over to that area that said drop images here. They come right in. And as you see, all images that you're going to be blending together are there. So next step is to go over to the right side of your screen, of your program screen, and click on the preference one. That's the one that has a little gear on it. There's a couple of different ways you can blend the images together for StarStaX. One for StarTrax. One of them is the lighten mode, and that basically takes the lightest part of each image as it stacks them together, and that's what comes through. So therefore, that's why the trail comes through on the dark areas. The other way to do it really is the gap filling mode, and I like to use the gap filling mode a little bit more because since we are stacking together multiple 30-second shots, there was a very, very, very slight shutter delay in between each one of those shots, and if it's not cleaned up in the gap blending mode, when you print it large, you'll actually see tiny gaps. You know, for display on the internet, lighten is fine, but I find that this works better for everything. Anyway, so we have one other little option here that we have to check, which is comet mode. Now, comet mode is actually a really fun thing. What it does is it makes your star trails, instead of being even all the way through, it starts them smaller and grows wider, kind of like what a comet would look like. Like it has a comet trail to it. So you can turn that on or not. You have a little adjustment here to make the trail shorter or the trails longer. We're going to leave it off and just process this normally. So the next step is just to go over here to the top left corner, and you'll see the fourth button in. Looks like a couple little, looks like a can almost there. But that's your processing button. That's going to start processing the star trails. And when you click it, you'll see that it's one by one, slowly adding those images in. And you can slowly start to see star trails developing. So in the interest of time right now, I'm actually just going to pause the recording for a second and pick it back up once the blending has basically completed. So as you can see, StarStaX has basically finished the blending. It just has a couple of more images to go. You see the star trails have developed. And the next thing that's going to happen once it's finishing up these last images is it's going to take you to the gap filling menu, which is where we will adjust how much the gap is filled in the star trails, where there's a gap missing. So here we are, we're on the last shot, and it's going to tell me, voila, blending done, right? And there we see this really funky looking image for a second. So what that was actually showing you was the amount of the image that was selected for the gap filling mode. And it's called the threshold overlay. And it's actually very helpful in determining what parts of the image is going to be selected and where the gaps are going to be filled. So one of the things we want to do is turn on the show threshold overlay. And as you see, there's actually a little less selected than there was a minute ago because I went and I just lowered I went and I raised the threshold a little bit. And this looks like a pretty good selection. It's never going to be perfect. Last but not least, what you want to do is you want to adjust the amount it's filled. If they're tiny, tiny gaps, you want it a little lower. If they're larger gaps, you might need it a little bit more. You turn the threshold overlay off. You see your image one last time, and then we go up to the upper right-hand corner and click the Save As button, and we save it somewhere in a folder somewhere where we're going to be able to find it. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to open that image up in Photoshop, and we're going to look at it again for two reasons. The first reason is because after the stacking, sometimes the image can become a little darker or too bright in areas and might need a little bit more correction than what you did in Lightroom. can't always get your final image right before you stack everything together. So one of the things I like to use is I like to use the adjustment layers. And if you don't see them, they're over here on your right-hand side. If you don't see them there, just click on Window and click Adjustments. And the reason why I like to use them is because what it's going to do is any adjustment I'm going to make now for exposure or vibrance, saturation, filters, is going to happen on a new layer. It's not going to happen to the original image. So for instance, I'm going to add I find this image to be a little bit too dark and drab. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Curves, and it added the curves to a new layer. And in the properties over here, I can just boost that up a little bit. And as you can see, you can turn it on and off, and it doesn't affect the original layer. One other thing, I want to add one other layer of curves, and I'm just going to add a little bit of contrast in there just to make it pop a little bit more. There's other things you can do, such as adding vibrance, hue saturation, photo filters, but I don't think we need to do any of those things to the image. It looks pretty good the way it is. And then the next thing you want to do in Photoshop is you want to kind of just look through your image to make sure you don't have any planes streaking across the sky, because that is one surefire way to absolutely ruin a good star trail shot. So this image is actually pretty clean. It was shot at around 4 in the morning, so there's not many planes flying in the desert at that time. But I'm going to pull up an image real quickly that does have a whole bunch of planes running through it. And you can see them streaking across right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually go in there and we're going to zoom in. And you can see there's a lot more than is visible to the eye. And we're going to use our clone stamp. And one of the things when we use our clone stamp is we want to make sure our hardness is set to 0, and then that we have a good sized brush that will work for us. You want to select the point on the star trail that is near to the plane, obviously not on the plane. And you do that by holding down Alt while clicking. And then you just come up to that area, and you want to lay that star trail in there very carefully to make sure you have a continued and even star trail. And you just continue cleaning up. Sometimes you're going to have to take new selections along the way, because you see it's still working fine there, but if I would go to my next thing, it's not as even, and as I go more and more, you're starting to see some bends in there. So what you would do is you would just reselect a point on that star trail, come in here, and put it in, so now the blend is happening evenly again. It's a tedious process, it's a long process, but it's worth it, and I'll show you why. This is the image with the planes in it. After I spent probably a little over an hour, maybe 2 hours cleaning up that image, and sometimes it's not that bad because this one had tons and tons of planes running through it. Most of the time you only have 1 or 2, so it takes maybe 10-15 minutes to clean up. After I cleaned it up, that's my final image. It's a much better image than it would have been had you had the planes in there. So I hope these tutorials have been helpful for you, and I hope it has inspired you to maybe go out and try shooting some star trails. It's a really fun thing to do. It's not that difficult. It's time consuming, but it's not difficult. So good luck, happy shootings, and I look forward to seeing your results.